Welcome to Nocturne, where the past is not just remembered. It lingers. Tonight we are going to Galveston, Texas, an island city sitting just 2 miles off the Texas coast. On the surface, it is charming, Victorian homes, historic downtown streets, the sound of waves along the seawall. But Galveston is also the site of the deadliest natural disaster in United States history. On September 8, 1900, a category for hurricane made landfall here. At the time, meteorology was primitive. Warnings were delayed. Many residents did not evacuate. By the time the storm surge rolled in, it was too late. Water rose over 15 feet in some parts of the island. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to splintered. Lumber, an estimated 6,000 to 8,000 people died in a single night. That number made up nearly 20% of the city's population at the time. Bodies were found tangled in debris. Families were wiped out. Funeral pyres burned for weeks because there were too many dead to bury individually. Afterward, engineers physically raised the island. Sand was pumped beneath buildings to elevate streets. A 17-foot seawall was constructed. Modern Galveston literally sits on top of its past, and when a place experiences that level of concentrated death, stories follow. Tonight we are exploring the 10 most haunted places in Galveston, Texas. Not just the legends, but the history that gave rise to them. Let's begin. Number 10, Hotel Galvez. The Hotel Galvez opened in 1911. It was constructed along the newly built seawall facing the Gulf of Mexico. Its purpose was symbolic. Galveston needed to prove it could recover. The hurricane had shattered its status as the leading port in Texas. Investors were hesitant. Tourism was fragile, so they built something grand, a Mediterranean revival-style hotel with arched windows, red tile roofing, and sweeping ocean views. It quickly became known as the Queen of the Gulf. Presidents stayed there. Franklin D. Roosevelt visited during his political career. During World War II, the hotel was requisitioned by the U.S. Coast Guard and used as housing for officers. So by the mid-20th century, this building had already witnessed disaster recovery, global war, and decades of changing American culture. The most famous haunting associated with Hotel Galvez centers on a woman commonly referred to as Audra. The story, passed down through hotel lore, claims that in the 1950s a young woman stayed in the hotel while waiting for a sailor, to return from sea. Believing he had died, she allegedly hanged herself inside the building. Public documentation verifying the full details of this account is limited, and historians debate the accuracy of the narrative as commonly told. However, the legend became attached specifically to room 505. Guests assigned to that room have reported repeated electrical disturbances, lights flickering, bathroom doors locking. From the inside, televisions activating without input. Some describe the scent of floral perfume appearing briefly and then disappearing. Others report a cold sensation concentrated in the bathroom area. Hotel staff have acknowledged frequent guest reports tied specifically to that room. The hotel now incorporates the story into guided ghost tours. Whether the legend originated from a single tragic event or evolved over time, the atmosphere of the building contributes to its reputation. Long hallways, thick walls, Gulf winds pushing against windows at night, and beyond folklore, the hotel stands only steps from where thousands died during the 1900 storm. When you stand in the upper floors and look out toward the Gulf at night, you are looking at the same waters that carried debris and bodies back onto shore over a century ago. The building represents resilience, but it was built in the shadow of catastrophe, and that shadow is part of its identity. Number 9, the Grand 1894 Opera House. The Grand Opera House opened in 1894, just 6 years before the Great Storm. It was constructed during Galveston's golden era when the city was known as the Wall Street of the South. At the time, Galveston was one of the wealthiest cities in Texas. Cotton, shipping, banking, commerce flowed through the island. The Grand Opera House was built as a symbol of cultural sophistication. It hosted vaudeville acts, opera performances, and touring theater productions from across the country. When the hurricane struck in 1900, floodwaters poured through downtown. The theater suffered significant damage. Interior seating was destroyed, woodwork was warped, but the structure remained standing. That fact alone became part of its mystique. It survived, it reopened, it continued hosting performances for over a century. Theater spaces have always been associated with superstition. Actors speak of ghost lights, a single bulb left on stage overnight to ward off spirits. At the Grand, performers and staff over decades have shared stories of unexplained activity. Footsteps heard in the balcony when the theater was empty, stage curtains moving without visible airflow, doors closing backstage after rehearsals. Some actors have described the sensation of being watched while standing alone under stage lights. Importantly, these accounts are anecdotal. There is no official documentation of verified paranormal incidents. However, the emotional intensity of theater contributes to the atmosphere. For over 130 years, thousands of performers have stood on that stage, nervous energy, applause, failure, triumph, and outside its doors. In 1900, the city was being destroyed by wind and water. Imagine surviving that storm inside a darkened auditorium, hearing debris crash through nearby streets. Knowing thousands were dying outside, the Grand Opera House did not just survive history, it absorbed it, and spaces built for performance often feel different once the audience leaves. Number 8, Moody Mansion. Moody Mansion was completed in 1895. It was originally built for Willis L. Moore, but after financial strain following the 1900 hurricane, it was sold in 1905 to William Lewis Moody, Jr., one of the most powerful businessmen in Texas at the time. The mansion contains 31 rooms, spread across 4 floors, 20,000 square feet of preserved late Victorian architecture. Ornate woodwork, stained glass, imported furnishings, heavy drapery. Unlike much of Galveston, the mansion survived the Great Storm with relatively limited structural damage. That fact alone changed the trajectory of the Moody family's legacy. While countless families lost everything, the Moodys expanded their influence, investing in cotton, banking, insurance, and shipping. They played a significant role in rebuilding Galveston's economy. The house remained in the Moody family until 1963. It is now a museum. Visitors walking through Moody Mansion often comment on the stillness inside. The house feels sealed in time. Original furniture remains in place. Bedrooms look as if someone might return at any moment. Over the years, staff and guests have described unexplained experiences. Footsteps heard on upper floors after closing, the sound of doors clicking shut when no one is present, sudden cold drafts in rooms with no open windows. Some claim to have seen figures reflected in mirrors, particularly on the 3rd floor. There are no official confirmations of paranormal activity. But the house represents something psychologically powerful. It is a monument to survival and wealth in a city that experienced catastrophic loss. The hurricane of 1900 redistributed power in Galveston. Families that survived financially reshaped the island, and Moody Mansion stands as a preserved artifact of that transformation. Walking through its halls at dusk, when sunlight fades through stained glass windows, the house feels less like a museum and more like a preserved moment suspended between eras. Number 7, Flagship Hotel. The Flagship Hotel was born in 1965, standing boldly over the Gulf at the end of Galveston's Pleasure Pier. Imagine this: 225 rooms suspended above open water, balconies swaying with the wind, and the relentless sound of waves hammering the pilings beneath. It was luxurious, it was daring, it was vulnerable. Over the years, the hotel endured hurricanes and accidents along the pier, and locals whispered that the Gulf doesn't forget. Guests described the unsettling sensation of the building trembling beneath them during storms, a subtle warning from the sea itself. The most popular story centers on room 507. A guest reportedly saw a shadowy figure of a man at the balcony railing, staring out at the water. When the guest returned the next day, hotel records confirmed no one had occupied that room in months. Staff also reported unexplained elevator stops, flickering lights, and footsteps echoing through empty corridors. Even after the hotel was damaged in Hurricane Ike in 2008 and eventually demolished by 2013, locals claim that late at night, the sound of footsteps and distant voices can still be heard in the air above the water, as if the hotel never truly left. Number 6. Galveston Orphans Home Bryan Museum. Built in 1895 as the Galveston Orphans Home, this massive brick building was meant to be a sanctuary for children who had lost their parents. But on September 8, 1900, the great storm swept through Galveston, and the orphanage, like the rest of the island, was engulfed in floodwaters. Accounts from the time describe frantic staff and children climbing to the upper floors as water rose rapidly. Makeshift rafts were launched from windows. Some children were rescued, some were carried away by the surging water, and tragically, not all survived. Newspapers from the period list dozens of children who perished, their small lives claimed in a matter of hours. The orphanage itself sustained structural damage, and 4 weeks afterward, volunteers and rescue teams combed the wreckage for survivors. In the decades since, the building has transformed. It served as a hospital for years, before becoming the Bryan Museum, now housing one of the largest collections of Texas and American West artifacts. But the echoes of its past remain. Visitors and staff report children's laughter and running footsteps in empty galleries, particularly near the former dormitories. Some claim to see a shadowy girl named Clara, clutching a doll, glancing wistfully through old windows. Lights flicker when no one is present. Cold spots appear in hallways, and objects occasionally shift for no discernible reason. It is a place where history and hauntings collide, a building shaped by joy, sorrow, and loss. The energy of hundreds of children, both lost and displaced, seems to whisper just beneath the polished floors, a reminder that some stories never truly leave the walls that bore witness. Number 5. Ashton Villa. Ashton Villa, completed in 1859, is one of Galveston's oldest brick mansions, a survivor of both the Civil War and the Great Storm of 1900. Its walls have witnessed military occupation, political upheaval, and generations of families. The mansion's most famous haunt is a Confederate soldier, seen pacing the grand staircase at night, as if awaiting orders long forgotten. Guests and staff also report footsteps in empty hallways and mirrors reflecting a woman in period clothing who vanishes when approached. The mansion has survived almost everything except the passage of time. Each creaking floorboard, every flickering light, seems to whisper stories of the past when the wind howls through the property. Visitors swear it carries the echo of commands and cries from centuries ago. Number 4. The Strand Historic District. Before 1900, the Strand was known as the Wall Street of the South. Massive brick buildings lined the streets. Cotton exchanges, banks, import houses, and shipping firms operated daily. On September 8, 1900, storm surge overwhelmed the district. Water levels reached approximately 15 feet above sea level in some areas. Buildings filled rapidly. Many people working inside were trapped. Historical accounts describe employees climbing 2 upper floors as water surged through the streets. Some survived, many did not. After the storm, the district was buried in debris and bodies. Cleanup crews worked for weeks. Today, the Strand is restored and vibrant, but employees of shops and restaurants sometimes report unexplained noises in upper stories of 19th century buildings, footsteps in locked offices, objects falling overnight, sudden cold drafts in sealed stairwells. There is no verified documentation of hauntings, but the death toll in this district during the hurricane is historically established. The entire area was physically raised in elevation after the storm, meaning many original ground floors now sit partially underground. History quite literally lies beneath your feet. Number 3. Tremont House Hotel. The Tremont House was originally built in 1839 as a luxury hotel for Galveston's wealthy visitors, rebuilt multiple times after fires and storms, with the current structure opening in 1870. Its grand lobby, soaring ceilings, and elegant ballrooms made it the centerpiece of social life in Galveston during the late 19th century, but behind the opulence lies tragedy. Guests and staff have reported unexplained cold spots in the hallways, the sound of footsteps when no one is present, and faint whispering that seems to come from the walls themselves. The most famous haunting involves a maid who died tragically after a fall in the grand staircase. Witnesses claim to see her spirit in a long dress, silently gliding across the floors or peeking down from the upper landing. Some say she appears near the elevators, holding an invisible tray as if still performing her duties. Another tale recounts the suitor's shadow, a ghostly man who allegedly roams the second-floor corridors, thought to be a jilted lover who died of heartbreak. In the hotel during the 1880s, guests report seeing fleeting glimpses of a man in a dark suit, standing silently in doorways, disappearing when approached. In addition to these spirits, modern guests have described chairs moving on their own in empty rooms, the sound of doors opening and closing, and even cold gusts in rooms with all windows shut, creating the sense that the hotel itself remembers its long, dramatic past. The Tremont House is not just a hotel. It is a crossroads of Galveston history, luxury, tragedy, and lingering spirits. Walking through its ornate halls, you can almost hear the echo of laughter, whispered conversations, and the soft, mournful sighs of those who never left. Number 2, Old City Cemetery. The Old City Cemetery in Galveston has stood for centuries, holding the graves of early settlers, Civil War soldiers, yellow fever victims, and those lost in the 1900 hurricane. Mass graves are scattered throughout, and storms over the decades have shifted headstones and wrought iron fences, giving the grounds a hauntingly disheveled, uneven appearance. Locals call the cemetery a place where the past refuses to rest. Paranormal activity includes the infamous White Lady, a spectral figure gliding silently among the oldest graves during foggy mornings. Some visitors report feeling cold, even on warm days, as if the air itself carries sorrow. Shadowy figures appear between the headstones, and orbs have been captured in photographs, hovering unnaturally above certain graves. Sudden drops in temperature startle even seasoned ghost hunters. Another widely told story involves a Civil War soldier's apparition, reportedly pacing the rows of graves with his uniform intact, silently keeping watch. Visitors sometimes hear the clatter of boots on gravel, the faint rattle of a saber, or the distant sound of commands being shouted. These occurrences are said to intensify near the section of the cemetery where yellow fever victims were buried en masse, amplifying the oppressive sense of grief and loss. Yet another chilling tale tells of a woman weeping among the graves, her cries audible in the distance, yet impossible to locate. Some claim she appears only at night, lingering near the oldest tombstones before disappearing into the shadows. Walking the cemetery, one feels not just the weight of death, but the echo of despair, sorrow, and lingering memories that have refused to fade. Number 1, Galveston Seawall and Burial Sites. The Galveston Seawall was built after the Great Storm of 1900, which claimed an estimated 6,000,080,000 lives, making it the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history. Thousands were swept away, some buried at sea, some returned to shore by tides. Mass pyres burned for days along the beach to prevent disease. The seawall became both a protective barrier and a monument to the immense human cost of the storm. Locals report a dense, oppressive weight in the air at night along the seawall. Phantom figures dressed in 1900-era clothing are said to appear, fleeing the rising water's shadows of those who never survived. Some witnesses hear distant cries, the shuffle of feet in the sand, or see fleeting reflections on the water that vanish when approached. Another ghostly tale involves a man carrying a child, appearing near the seawall at dusk. Witnesses describe a faint outline of a father clutching his child, walking slowly into the waves, only to vanish seconds later, leaving the sand undisturbed. A third story speaks of a group of spectral children playing near the seawall, laughing and running along the waterline. Their games abruptly stop when observers approach, as if the children are aware of the living watching them. Walking the seawall today, the Gulf waves crash as they have for centuries, but the air is thick with memory. It is not just a wall against the sea. It is a wall against forgetting, a place where grief, tragedy, and history converge and where the past whispers in every crashing wave. Galveston rebuilt. It raised itself from the sand, engineered one of the most ambitious grade-raising projects in American history. constructed a seawall that still stands today. Tourists walk the strand, couples marry at the Grand Galvez, families visit the beach. But beneath the charm, beneath the architecture, beneath the seawater, there are layers of memory. The deadliest storm in American history did not erase this city. It transformed it, whether the stories of hauntings are psychological echoes, urban legend, or something beyond explanation. One fact remains undeniable. In 1900, thousands died here, and history does not disappear, it settles. If you found this exploration meaningful, subscribe to Nocturne, because history is darkest where it is most real. Until next time, listen to the wind, watch the tide, and remember some places don't forget.